Okay, this Hangout on Air is live. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us in person this month. I know everyone has to get out of the 96. Is it 96 in New York today? Something like that. 96 degree weather in New York. I have a pretty hard out today, so we're going to keep this on focus. Someone new this month? Welcome.
Yes, thank you.
So that's why we were chatting before we fired up. But tell us what you do. Where are you? What are you doing?
I work for a company called Participant Media.
Okay.
We make movies.
Oh, cool.
And out of the New York office, we work also in TV broadcasting. And we have about 200 Macs, and we're looking to start managing them in a more organized way than just like one-off each and every time. So there's a number of...
So you're basically not managing them right now?
Right now, I do have to say one of our system admins put into place a monkey and monkey slash starts with a D. Deploy Studio solution.
All right.
So that's being used so that we can get some consistent deployments. And so we're also looking at, going forward, how do we push out updates? I was recently brought in. I'm coming from years of Microsoft administration. I've dealt with Macs a little bit, and it's been eye-opening that, I guess the challenges as far as tools are concerned. So we've been looking at Casper, we've been looking at other various solutions. So I was hoping to at some point today, hopefully glean some insights as far as some solutions that you all trust and
Good.
work well.
Well, glad you're here. I think you'll find this useful. A lot of people deal with Windows as well, so and at least you do have some way to reach out to these machines right now. So hopefully with Monkey, if there's something you need to do to all your machines, you at least have some way of doing that, even if that's deploying another product. You have a way to sort of touch these machines, which is pretty cool. What challenges have you faced so far, or you're just sort of like...
I'm listening right now. I've literally been there weeks. So before I go into kind of the mode of making suggestions, I've really been just kind of listening and doing research. And I think when it comes to endpoint management, I'm at that same point as well. It's just kind of because everyone has an opinion and thought, and every salesperson, of course, has an opinion and thought, and they all believe it. So I'd really like to see and speak with some folks who are actually in the trenches.
Okay. You doing any iOS management as well, or is it purely Mac at this point?
I don't believe there's any iOS managed. It's a BYOD environment, which is an additional challenge.
Yeah.
So I think everybody on our team, which it's been really exciting, both from our IT director to the guys that I work with, we're all on the same page as far as wanting to do things best method. And there's nobody who's just like, it's not worth it, let's just do this. We're all looking to do things the right way.
With the business that you're in, with these movies, are people putting these movies on their Macs? Are you worried about sort of like intellectual property?
Yeah, I would say, just in conversations that I've had briefly, I would say our primary concerns are going to be probably our reputation.
Yeah.
And possibly, we've seen the break-in, and I think was it Sony's Entertainment, and all those things going out on the web. So I would say between intellectual property and reputation through email, something said in the email, instant message can be skewed, if put out there nefariously. So.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, interesting. Well, I think some of that we've all dealt with in some ways. So yeah, ask your questions when you have them. So yeah, some administrative stuff. We were talking a little bit before we started. Ed, you were off somewhere, but we were talking about the time of this meeting. This isn't something that has to be decided right now, but I would love to get feedback from people who show up here in person or join remotely or whatever. But when Ed and I were first talking about doing this meeting, we thought, hey, we're all professionals, and professionals should get time to go do professional development, so we're going to set this meeting sort of like at the end of the day, but still part of, quote unquote, part of the work day. And Lorenzo brought up that, hey, that might stop some people from showing up here because their business doesn't allow them to do this. I would imagine that they could still join via Hangout, possibly, but you're right. It might prevent some people. So if this is a struggle for you to attend because of the time, or people that think it's a struggle because of the time, I'd love to hear that feedback, and I'm certainly willing to push this back a little bit to get it outside of the workday or figure something else out. So I'd love to hear that feedback from people. One of the other things we started talking a bit about was Alistair said, hey, we should have a Slack channel for this meeting. We usually have a little back channel on IRC, so people who are watching via Hangout can ask us questions in the room, and I just keep an IRC client here open and watch people. Slack is the hot new thing. But I think, for me personally, this is something, so Alistair brought this up, and I had this almost allergic reaction to that. Not because of Slack per se, but it's something I've been thinking about a lot recently, and I'll call it the inbox problem. Like, how many inboxes can you have? Everything's an inbox. Your Twitter stream, email, Slack, IRC, and you get all these unread badges on everything, and before you know it, you just can't keep up. And I think it took a few years ago. It took me seeing some people that I really respect and I know are brilliant people who get a lot of stuff done, and I go search for their blog, or I search for them on Twitter, and they're just nowhere to be found. And that was kind of oh yeah. You don't have to do all this, and you can sort of be in control of what you pay attention to and what you give your attention to. And there's this IRC channel called OS10 Server. It might be useful. It's # OS10 - server, and it's useful. A lot of people sit in that channel and ask questions all day. I'm an IRC person, so I kind of have an IRC client open anyway, so I can kind of keep that open anyway. And then some people split off from that and did a Slack channel, and that was just sort of the breaking point for me. It's I can't pay attention to this. But I will say, I made an account, and if someone mentions me, I get a notification, and then I go try to get the context and answer their question. But it's not something I can pay attention to all the time. But there are people who are they're in IRC, they're on Slack, they're answering email. I'm when do you get any work done? Maybe that's just my own personal, maybe I struggle with that, and it's something other people don't struggle with. But I personally struggle with, I can't get stuff done and pay attention to all this stuff. So for me, it's this constant influx. Do you not find that to be a problem?
Is get anything done? I have Graham so that I don't need to get anything done. It helps me how to get things done. Yeah, I mean, there's people that I wonder how they're getting along without constantly communicating, but that's oversharing in general in people's online lives. Having the 16 competing standards, and this is crazy, let's stop this, stop all of the different conversations, different places. Now there are 17 competing standards, right? Yeah, it is yet another place to be, but IRC has been abandoned. In terms of Slack started, and the people who would go to IRC for the conversation are now having that conversation on Slack.
Specifically to the OS10 server channel, you're saying?
Specifically to the OS10 server channel. I mean, the OS10 server channel in Slack is now kind of low. They made one just for, okay, really? There's still people that are having OS10 server conversations.
See, I haven't
That's
really
pretty low traffic.
Okay, so I found that to be useful, to be honest, because
the lack of noise.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I don't know. Please do not take this the wrong way, anyone who's on Slack. But I don't know what the quality is on Slack. But when that Slack channel opened, the signal to noise ratio on OS X server got so much better because there wasn't all the banter and nonsense. It was actually something I could then look over and follow. And I'm all for some personality.
It's not Slack, you're dissing now, it's IRC.
I'm not dissing. I'm saying I'm all for some personality.
Sure.
Right? I like character, and I don't mind some offhand comments every now and then. But it was like, you know, the OS X server channel would kind of scroll so fast that I just couldn't keep up. Whereas now it's like, okay, this is something I can actually kind of keep up with. And yeah, right, if I haven't looked at it in a little bit, my scroll back isn't 5 pages long. So I found that to be useful.
I'm happy with the fact that the interface is only the things that I want to interact with out of it, and the noisiest thing is muted. And if there hasn't been a recent update to a channel, I just don't see that channel existed. So when I'm ready to interact with a topic, that is when I'll go to that. I'll use a quick key to get to that channel and start the conversation that's particular to this topic, and everybody else has favorites that therefore they'll see it at the top of their list. They won't see it even if it's muted.
That's fair enough. Maybe Slack has better tools to deal with this.
It does. It has built a tool set around people who have had poor, distracting interactions with their community in the past of multiple locations. And the @ symbol in the top right-hand corner of you need the context, or you want to do of when you got mentioned, hit the gosh darn @ symbol. It's always there in the interface.
That's
so
fair enough.
I can swim, and then like there's people who specifically are saying with Slack that it's almost you can get into the Twitter I want to check it all the time type of thing.
But you shouldn't have to. Right?
And it's 24/7 that you've got people around the world. We're leaked right now. We have 1,337 people in the Slack channel. There's people around the world, so you can pay too much attention to it, of course.
Yeah.
But
well, you can do that with it.
The fact that it starts out with you at least you have to put a little bit of effort into, deciding that you're going to shave it down to I'm only interested in favoriting these things or seeing the updates of these things.
I just think it's a worthwhile discussion because every now and then someone new to the community shows up at this meeting, and we heap a bunch of resources on them. Like, oh, you're new to Mac administration. Well, you should read these books, and there's this mailing list, and there's this Slack channel, and like, what's the point where it's just like, whoa, it's like too much, right? Oh, this is overwhelming. Like, I'm not sure, right? Like, is there a point where that's just too many resources, too many things to look at? I don't know.
I'm a +1 for Slack, though. It's just the ease of setup, especially for new folks. Might not have used IRC in the past or know about the channel.
Here's the thing I don't get.
Find about it. Slack gives you, like Alistair said, the tools to cut down a lot of the noise if you choose to. We'll never be able to control how people use it, really, unless they get whoever's in charge of it gets really hardcore about moderating. Saying, hey, keep these things to the demo channel or cut the noise down, but.
Well, that's good to know. What is it? MacAdmins? Like, how do you go join? Just for people new to this, there's a web page you have to go.
Yes, if you go to macadmins.slack, macadmins.org, slack.macadmins.org.
We will.
macadmins.org. There is the only thing at macadmins.org is put in your email and we'll send you an invite, no questions asked, and that will. There are now 1,346. We've surpassed leaked. we've been leaked and then went beyond.
But to bring this back, perhaps on topic, especially for people who are new to this, whether in the room or on the Hangout, no matter if you go to the IRC channel or MacAdmins. I definitely find the Mac community to be the friendliest tech community I've ever dealt with. If you go there and say, I have this dumb question, or I have this question, I'm brand new to this, no one's going to go like, hey, read the manual, jerk. Like, people are very like, well, what have you tried so far? Like, people genuinely try to help. So that's one of the best things about the Mac community that I find. Especially, like, there are more and more people who, like, I've been running Windows for forever, and now we got some Macs in the mix, and we have to manage them. So there are a lot of good resources.
If you guys would recommend any a list you were mentioning before for like top resources, if I did want to read books,
You know, there isn't. I think that's one of the projects I've been kind of thinking about lately. Like, I registered a domain name that would be sort of similar to this type of thing, and it should just be a list of like, hey, you're a MacAdmin. Here are a list of resources. Like,
I've been like drilling the Penn State
yep, I was
YouTube channel.
Gonna mention that.
It's just like really stuff. So.
I was gonna mention that. You know, these conferences, they're always good to attend, but if you missed it or you couldn't attend it for whatever reason, a lot of them put their videos up online. Penn State's a great example, particularly since that was 2 months ago, right? So like all that content is very recent. It's not like you're looking at these videos from 2011 and maybe things have changed. That was 2 months ago. All this information is still pretty fresh, so that one's good.
There's still stuff from last year's conference.
Oh,
relevant as well.
Oh, I'm sure. Max Sysadmin is coming up. Their videos always go up, and that's probably the ones from last year are pretty good. I forget who was here a month or 2 ago, or 3 at this point, and they were asking about resources for new people. I think the other thing that I mentioned at the time was anything written by Eric Dreyer, A-R-E-K, D-R-Y-E-R. He is an Apple trainer, and he writes these books. And sometimes he co-authors them, but along with for Peach Pit, they're like the official Apple guides to a bunch of things. So whether that's client management or OS X server, he's like Amazon put his name in, and like anything recent that he's written, he's always a good resource as well. And if you're like me, I still like books. Like, books are nice. You can dog-ear the pages or highlight away. Post-it note pages, whatever. Yeah. Well, let's start with some speculation too. So Apple has this event tomorrow. I'm disappointed they didn't make it for today. It's usually on a Tuesday. It would have synced up nice with this meeting, but they didn't. They didn't care. So.
There's that much speculation. What?
We're getting a 6S.
Yeah.
We're getting an iPad Pro.
We might. It might be this month. I don't know if they're holding stuff off for next month. Or
Well,
month.
there's always a difference between what's announced and what is.
When it comes.
Yeah, and there's just shipping today, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So, do we think we're going to get the 10/11 ship date tomorrow?
Date.
You think it's
it'll be tomorrow?
You think it's getting released tomorrow?
Have you been using the betas?
Yeah.
While that one-liner that changes NVRAM and therefore turns off SIP that you can do as root is kind of silly.
No, but they've always said they were going to have a way during the developer betas to turn it off, and that will stop working in the retail version.
It's 8 now, right?
Yeah, so it's still a beta.
Yeah.
No,
It's
but
still
it is-
getting
it
turned
is
off
pretty
for
far
production release.
Yeah, for the retail release, that was going away. But I think they said that was. Hey, look, there are a lot of other ways around SIP, so I'm not worried about an NVRAM setting.
Well, so while we would think that maybe they should still not release the magic like Sting quite so early, there are people who need to be ready to use 10/11 tomorrow. They're saying they have to be ready. They have
It's
to be
this
ready.
mysterious day that's saying that.
So you know, like when you do a photocopy, you know that company that you.
I've heard of them.
Yeah. Well, we know somebody who works for them.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm the worst person at forecasting this stuff, but I can't imagine they drop it tomorrow.
It puts the fear of God in me to hear him say it.
I mean,
so.
we are in September already.
Oh yeah.
And we're getting late in the year, but
I would have thought later, but then he said, "Yeah, I need to be ready now." And
I would even
think he's blowing smoke.
I would even guess that like tomorrow they say, "Hey, we're shipping end of September." That wouldn't be too far off, but it wouldn't be tomorrow either.
I mean, this wouldn't be the first time they've set that precedent. Here's an OS. Surprise.
I guess. Although, that sounded like a complaint against the betas, but I have to tell you, like the betas started off like beta 1 was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be amazing, and then it took a nosedive, and I got worried. But I think it's gotten better. I think wouldn't you say, the more recent betas have gotten better again?
The betas have gotten better, but we're not necessarily closer to being able to use it.
We are. We're actually in pretty good shape. So here's a question. You know, you mentioned Sept and turning it off. Like, is there anyone in here that cannot roll out 10.11 because of Sept, because of Rufus? Like, does that stop? Is that a blocker for you because all of your stuff or something?
Some things break.
What
But
breaks for you?
it's older stuff.
VPN.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, it's a valid question. Like for us, we worked really hard to make sure all this stuff is now not affected by that. And there were a bunch of things we had to change, but what stops you right now? There's a VPN client that.
I'd say there's over a third that need it.
Wow.
So that's really a hard stop for, like, is if they were clamoring for it. There's plenty of people who have no
Okay.
have no indication that there's something on the horizon and/or that they would want it. So
I think it was Tim Sutton pointed out a bunch of the Adobe installers, the older installers, still install into user local, user bin or something.
The update manager tool, the remote update manager tool installs into the user S bin.
Yeah.
I honestly just am against running a 0.0 version of anything, just based on experience.
It kind of depends.
Because really have to.
There's that, but I feel like Yosemite was such a total train wreck that this is like Yosemite was the beta for all of this.
I mean, if my only worry was just a sense of caution about using the .0 release, that'd be okay. I'd feel good about it if I was like, okay, I don't want to use the .0 because I'm cautious, as opposed to Yosemite. It's like, well, this is just, we can't use this.
Yeah.
This is broken.
10.8, 10.9, we were able to roll out like day one.
Yeah, we rolled out 10.0.
10.10 was a total train wreck. And it still is not great, right? There are a bunch of bugs. And for us, like, yeah, well, we fixed these in 10.11. I mean, that's the thing with Apple. That's the thing with Apple in general. Like, whether you're an admin or a developer, at some point they drag you into the future, kicking and screaming, whatever. They're not going to let you support older versions, one way or another. That's their game, and so the sooner I can update, generally, the better. I actually feel pretty good overall about 10.11. I think. Like, it's been, again, maybe it's just Yosemite that's jading me a bit, but 10.11
lowered your
When
expectations.
you guys say release to production, are you talking about a group or for everyone? Like, do you guys approach one, some, many?
No. Well, so
floodgates?
we do, yeah, I think
We have a release.
Well, kind of. So we kind of discussed this a little bit last time with the OS. It's a little different. The OS, we usually try to do a pilot. And that's just like, hey, who wants to be our pilot tester? And I don't know, how many people, like, in the hundreds. So it feels like there could be a lot more people saying, like, oh yeah, just give me this stuff early. And it's several hundred. And we let them pilot test it. And we always give them the caveat of, like, you know, when this actually releases, you might have to wipe your machine. But it hasn't come to that in a while, which is great because Apple's made the final beta. You know, the retail one will be upgradable.
The master.
Well, yes, the master will just go right over that, which is good. Apple has put a lot of work into their upgrade process, and we've put a lot of work into our upgrade process. So we want people to do in-place upgrades, which is great because I think we were the first platform at Google that could do that a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And like, yeah, no one wants to take the time out of their day to like back up their data and nuke everything and reinstall. So like for us, in-place upgrades was the hugest win. So we have a little installer application that does all the pre-flight stuff. Like it caches the image locally, and then it does a disk space check to make sure, you know, it does all these little pre-flight things. make sure the battery is charged up enough, things like that. That the Apple process is great, but it doesn't tell you all those things. So like we want to make sure like, hey, set aside 3 hours for this. We tell people in advance, like, stay plugged in, do this, like maybe something you kick off before you go home at night. You know, like if you're running out the door to a meeting, now's not the time to do this. So like we put a lot of work into that. But anyway, we get these pilot testers. And then really like once we feel comfortable with that, we make sort of this like soft launch announcement like, hey everybody, it's available. If you want to update, go update. And you know, sometimes we'll find things from that process as it's a much wider audience. And then we do a little more forceful like, hey, you're going to need to update by this date. And again, that's mostly driven by security because Apple's patching things in 10.11 that they're not patching in 10.10. So we come along and give them this long lead time of like, you really need to be updated by this date. And then as it gets closer to that date, then we eventually put it into Simian/monthly and set a force date for our upgrader to run. And that will give them more naggy pop-ups, and eventually they just kind of get forced into it. And yeah, we then, if they kind of skip some of those things, we start, you know, we'll eventually revoke their network certificate. And, you know, we have other
ways of making it talk.
Yeah, well, the carrot and the stick, right? Like, we have other methods.
And the default monkey timeout is okay for your force install by date? It's only 8
That's
hours,
really sort
right?
of the last. But they've gotten plenty of warnings before that point.
It gets a pop-up every day, but...
And
it has red
emails
text
in our
it, but
case, there are a lot of...
I always felt just, well, I'm thinking recently that the 8-hour notice before I'm going to kick you off your machine if I got to reboot you is not long enough for them. Like,
but before that
plus,
point, hey, it's open
they've
source,
got it
you're
every
free to go
day.
change it, right? But before they get to that point, they've gotten a bunch
my
of...
point is, open source, you can change it.
Yeah.
You haven't felt the need to change it yet.
We haven't felt the need to change it simply because by the time they've gotten to that point, they've had 2 weeks, right, of pop-ups.
Generally a minimum 2 weeks, sometimes 1 week.
Sometimes one, very rarely, but yes. They've had multiple pop-ups.
And
I've started with my testers that it's a week as soon as it's released and we've smoke tested it. If the week is there, and then 2 weeks to prod. So that prod has 3 weeks.
Right, and we also, one of the things we do is also, it's always Wednesday,
Yep.
1 p.m. local time.
Yep.
So we're very regular about training the users.
It's coming back.
Yeah.
I do 6 p.m. Tuesdays, just to say, like, if Wednesday turns into a train wreck, like, okay, it's Wednesday. They can feel a little bit less stress of coming off the weekend or going into the weekend.
Yeah, so we got diverted a little bit. Oh, maybe WatchOS too.
Yeah,
WatchOS
I hope so.
version 2. Maybe. I'm not an Apple Watch person, but I'm assuming that's one of the other announcements tomorrow. Maybe. So Apple TV. Right, there are a lot of things. Like, I would. That makes me even more suspicious.
Take it. Come on.
The last keynote was pretty long.
Well, this isn't a keynote. This is just a what do you call it? A special event?
This is a big event, isn't it?
It's a. Oh.
They're doing it at,
They're doing it at the San Jose Center or something. No, the Civic Center, which supposedly has some historical connotations to it for Apple. Yeah, I don't know. They're kind of a mystery.
iPad Pro? I haven't heard anything.
I've seen that rumor a bunch of times where it'll be a slightly bigger screen.
Oh, okay. But it won't necessarily be the default form factor, right?
I don't think so. This will be a bigger
I
screen,
feel like they changed that.
which
too
will
often.
take advantage of the split screen stuff they've announced in iOS 9.
The same even run 2 apps.
Although I am still curious of what the advantage of that is, because there's still no inter-application drag and drop. So you can run two things at once, but you still have to jump through all the hoops of.
What's all the people who used to have two
browsing
iPads?
or an iPad and computer.
The iPad gloves that they keep wearing, operating it with their face. They actually throw it, yeah. Or the eye tracking that they do that Samsung doesn't do at all. Right.
I can see it for typing up an article while you're surfing.
I guess, yeah.
Watching Netflix.
If I need to do all that stuff, I'll use a computer.
I'm going to probably get rid of this, even though it's running iOS 9. Like, I love the only thing I'm looking forward to in iOS 9 is the back button that is physical on Android, and yet it's now in software, and it gives you the context of the breadcrumb you came from.
Yes,
that's nice.
It's nice, but it's like the smallest hit target in the world. It's awful. I've been dealing with this, and this is a small target. No, and the other problem is on Android, at least that button's right on the bottom. The back button, whereas on iOS, like
it's ergonomic.
As these screens get bigger, iOS keeps moving all the controls up to the top. I don't understand that thinking.
That's right.
And the reachability is a joke. Like, it's such a terrible solution. It's not discoverable. Most people discover it by mistake and go, what the hell happened? What happened? So I don't like reachability. That's kind of silly. Just start putting controls at the bottom of the screen. It's not complicated.
Have you ever used Request Desktop Site to make it not give you the crap mobile version? So
sometimes
it was you would go to bookmarks essentially, and if you pull down like as if you're scrolling the list in bookmarks, you'll see it at the top. And so that was how undiscoverable it used to be. That
not only that, you have to click into the
you have to show focus into the address bar first to get bookmarks, and then you need to scroll. I
find mobile Safari in general to be a little.
You need to press hold on the refresh button in the address bar to get to Request Desktop Site. And it's kind of like, why did you guys give us something nice, then totally bury it, and now make it totally undiscoverable again?
I don't know.
Maybe they don't want you to use it.
I mean, maybe that's
it's there, but we don't.
Yeah.
Maybe it's an elegant interface to interact with. Maybe at some point in some iteration of them hiding this feature that somebody made work, and like continues to be supported in the fact that it exists. I can't quite get that. Because I use it. I want to be able to use it. I want to be able to say, hey, GitHub, no, I don't just want to see this. I would like to see the page and be able to get to, I don't know, the wiki. Things like that.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I think I've mentioned this before, but
it's just bizarre. That's
I see people all the time who say, like, oh, I do everything on my iPad, and I get really sort of envious, and I try to do that myself, and I just end in frustration, and I just go like, yeah, if I need something small and portable, I'll go for an 11 or 12-inch machine, and it's sort of like a real machine versus the hoops I have to jump through on iOS sometimes. But, at least I can look at an MMS message safely. So,
got that going for it.
Got that going for it.
I've never heard anyone actually say I do everything on my iPad, other than people who just email all day.
Yeah, I've heard it.
Not even word processing.
There's some developers that I know that are like, I do everything but Xcode on my iPad.
Wow.
Yeah, wow, exactly. Like I don't.
They have an external keyboard though.
Probably. That makes it a little bit more bearable, but I still have found, it's not the keyboard for me. It's just my whole workflow doesn't work because, like, share sheets are a total joke in iOS. Like, some things are there some of the time.
The inconsistency of when it's not
there. Yeah, it's the consistency of when it's there, and it's just like, I just want this file from this thing in this other thing. Why? Like, it makes my head explode sometimes. I'm like, sometimes it's just not even possible to get it done. I think I had this conversation with someone around, like, ringtones. Like, I have this MP4 file. I just, it's in Dropbox. Just on the device itself. Why can't I make it a ringtone? And it's like, oh, well, share it from this thing into this thing, and then this other thing to this thing, and then open it.
I had that same thing happen recently. I just needed an application to loop a video, and I was just testing a couple different apps. There's a bunch of them claim they'll do it, but a lot of them actually will either just crash or they'll stop looping the video. Like it's ridiculous.
And then sometimes,
and I couldn't just move the file around.
Yes,
as I
that's
wanted
the
to.
most frustrating thing to me.
I had to
in iOS.
import it in every method that the application expected.
Right.
Just
see, like,
tossing it.
but I'll give you like, there's an example of where it works really well. It's like you get a PDF, and it's like open in iBooks. If you have any PDF reader installed that offers it, like that's great. Every MP3 file, I want a similar open in music, this, that, the other thing. I want a video file. Open in this, that, the other thing. Like, it's just so inconsistent.
Because of the file format.
But same thing though, like, you know, sort of my other hat with Mac Tech, editing. Forget it. You know, people send me an article and it's a zip file. So now AirDisk Pro, I can download it, share it into AirDisk Pro, that'll unzip it for me. Then I have to go from there and like export to, and it's 2 seconds on a computer and like 4 hours on the iOS. So it's just, again, things could be easier on iOS, but I'm blaming my particular workflow not being compatible with that more than a fault of iOS per se. But that's why I don't understand like people who say like I do everything on my iPad besides Xcode. It's like, what do you do? Because I can't.
Tom Limoncelli talks about the read-only executive.
True. Yeah.
Person who needs to sign PDF. And
email.
Or communicate and say this is going to be my response to someone who's going to then pass it along.
I'm sure that frustration will alleviate a little bit as the devices get faster as well. Because
I find them
switching between
plenty
apps
fast enough.
I feel like switching between apps takes an eternity. Just relative to like alt-tabbing through like every single.
Well, exactly. But I think that's a function of iOS.
Yeah.
Because I think iOS. What's the word I'm looking for? Like it's artificially slow.
Yeah.
It's not the processor. Like if you go back to iOS 6, the task switcher's fast.
Yeah.
It's on older hardware, right? Like
you could. You're right.
Whereas
that drives me nuts though. That alone will stop me from ever attempting.
Right. I find some things on iOS are just artificially slow. But yeah, we've gone way down the rabbit hole on this. Any other predictions for tomorrow? Or not predictions, but like anything that impacts you that you think like, oh, if this gets released, it's going to be great. If this gets released, I'm in trouble. So, but this is what I was going to say. Is like they drop iOS and iOS now, OS 10 and iOS in tandem now. So you're saying if we get OS 10, 10.11 tomorrow, we're also going to get iOS 9.
Well, device, it might very well come. So,
like iOS, it doesn't really affect me.
I don't know that anyone's said that there's been enough component leaks that they've put together the entire Millennium Falcon yet. But so that I can't say it with any conviction from word on the street. All I know is that if LCAP comes out, I am poorly prepared. My testing regimen was documented a long time ago and not performed. But iOS 9 should be with the devices. Like,
yeah.
Why wouldn't they do the big reveal with the hardware that they make
the money
money
because they might reveal this hardware and it's available for order today, but not necessarily you can walk into a store and buy one, right? So that means maybe they'll give them a 2-week lead time, a 3-week lead time.
Only WatchOS would they be like, hey,
yes.
Because there's nothing new.
There's no new hardware.
Mazel tov, here you go. I'm really looking forward to it, but yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to all of the things breaking that we're supposed to have broken. Kernel extensions being unsigned, broken, yes, okay, perfectly all right.
Yeah, no.
Right into the wrong paths, like, who knew? In certain cases, like, yes, there's the better ways to be a good citizen.
Yes, in all fairness, this is a long time practice with Apple. Like, don't write to /system, don't write, like, there are...
Because they don't write to a user template. And then they did tell them you the right user template for the education guide. Yeah. That's kind of like, will you guys make up your mind? Like, so there was mixed messages to begin with.
There are things outside of the scope of Sept, and Apple has said, go ahead, right there. The user template being one of them.
Yep.
Right. They took that off the list of Sept protected files.
Artron broke it down for me. The paths and the rootless conf.
Yes.
And what the heck rootless conf means? Like, would it kill them to put a comment in the file? And I know that's not an actual configuration file. It's an implementation detail. They can overwrite the running state of the system just like the OAuth-DB with. And yet they don't put a gosh darn comment in the gosh darn file about it.
Well, it's not for you to touch, so.
I can read. It's
Yeah,
in
you can.
plain text, not even binary. Anyway.
Yeah.
That's bizarre. Like, how many configuration file formats are there? And they have this weird, like, there's a star and a path, and then the path with a star at the end. The same path. I'm kind of like, you guys just couldn't come up with any, couldn't be bothered to make a format to express this in.
It's a bit of an oddball format, yeah.
I'm only annoyed because I actually got called by it. You know? I actually got burned by.
So it seems like the only thing bugging people with whatever announcements there will be tomorrow is potentially SIP on OS 10. That's the big sticking point for people. Yeah. I don't know. We've been doing a lot of testing and making sure we're ready for that as much as possible. And some things it turns out, like, I think early on in the betas we had this big list for Apple, like, oh yeah, it stops us from doing all these things. And then, as Apple slowly said, like, yeah, none of that's just going to change. We're like, well, we can't do all these things, but maybe that one's not a blocker. Maybe that one's not a block. And then we sort of whittled it down to, like, okay, here are the things that are really need to get done, and here's our goal. We need to do these things. Like, our security teams is basically like, back to my Mac. Flat out cannot be enabled. Like, that would be a blocker if we couldn't disable that somehow. And right now it's just like, we just unload the agents. Like, I think previously, right, we were going along and we were whacking something in that system thing like that will stop people from enabling that. But now it's like, all right, we'll just unload the agents and it won't run. I don't know what to tell you. It's
still there, but it's not loaded.
All right, so that actually brings me then to my, I guess, last question. Something else I've been thinking about. It's like, I think all of us in our environments will do things that, like, you get something done, maybe it's not pretty, but you get it done, and like months later you look back at it and like, man, I should really fix that. Like, I'm curious, like.
And then years later.
And then years later you look back, oh, I should have fixed that. Still should have fixed that. How much of that is going on? Like, I'm curious. Like, we're always going through our code and trying to clean stuff up, but I know we have some stuff where it's like, yeah, it's not the best way to do that, but it works, and we'll just leave it for now.
My follow-up question is, how many of those things begin with words cron job?
Have a cron job that comes through and
every 15 minutes and chmods the home directory.
Yeah, I don't think we're doing a lot of that.
No, not anymore.
Well, we're not doing it because we have Puppet.
Right.
We just let Puppet do it.
Because as long as it happens every half hour, we're okay.
Yeah, basically the same thing.
Too often.
Too often, you think?
Well, I feel like every 4 months I do I find a good candidate to be like, all right, that's embarrassing. Okay, like, that needs to stop. Like, how did I let that go this long? But so, like, I'm going to have Deploy Studio out at some point soon. But that's going to be if I still need NetBoot.
You already used Deploy Studio, or you're going to? Okay.
Have used it for a while and have pared it down significantly. And thought we were going to move to no imaging or something like that. And now we're kind of like, you know what, maybe we'll just go back. And the minute it takes to lay down an image, as long as we can sync that image efficiently, that'll be great. So, like, opinions will change about how guilty I should feel about a particular practice, but how dirty we let things get, we let it be manually done before we let it be dirty. And then it becomes what's the hottest fire, and then every 4 months we go back and we say, okay, how do we put out that fire that time? All right, like, let's, in stages, how can I improve the experience? And, like, our migration app is part AppleScript, part Bash. You know what? Once they're all migrated, there'll be no more migrations.
Yeah, that's a reasonable approach. That's a good approach. I think we do something similar. We sort of have like the camping rule, right? Like leave the campsite better than you found it. Like, even if you didn't do this thing, you go hunt down some code and you're like, oh my god, this is awful. I'm gonna not only make the change I need to make, but I'm gonna fix some of these other things. And like there are those types of fixes, but then there are these less frequent sort of just like, okay, this whole thing needs wholesale cleanup, and like it's going to be a pain, but we're going to do it.
It also depends, I think, on the scale. It's affecting a small number of users.
That's a good.
And it's not. It's a usability issue and not a security issue. Maybe you leave it.
Well, he makes decisions, right? But only I can prevent fires. So he helps me prioritize impact.
Okay.
But then, like, I don't have I don't have as much team play going on.
Yeah.
Where it's like other people would inspect it. Right now, I know I am throwing things up in the air, and as soon as I get somebody who's going to be at a similar engineering level, they're going to be like, "What the who?" And I'm going to be like, "Hey, but all of the techs that don't know much don't have a problem now. They have their jobs automated, no matter how I automated those things."
But I think that's a good balance. You know, it is really a good balance to have someone else who is dealing sort of with the rest of the organization, right, and helping set priorities. Because, you know, I know as a tech, right, like techs, we like to do the technical stuff. We like to automate things.
Mm-hmm.
In general, you know, there's that comic,
XKCD,
right? That
script,
like if you do this thing once a year, it's not worth automating, but if you do these things once a week, it's worth automating. But I think as techs, we just like saying, I automated this. Mm-hmm. And like when I do that again next year, I won't have to do it manually. Like we just like automating, all right? We just like saying, I automated this, even if it takes us, you know, a day to do the whole thing. But we just burned a day instead of doing something else, and we're only going to do this once a year. Like, we just kind of like doing it.
It pays in spades, though. You get your dividends back on that because you don't know what your workload would be like next year when the same job comes around. You're sitting there doing this, man, and it's like, damn, shit, I needed this.
But, the cleanup stuff, though, is funny because it's not really like a user-visible thing. It's like, you might do all this code cleanup, but the people whose systems you're administrating get no benefit out of it. They don't really get, like, maybe the infrastructure is more sound and it sort of helps them in some other way, but they don't really, like, the computer didn't necessarily get faster, they don't have new functionality, they don't care.
Yeah, sometimes all you get out of it is that you know it's done the right way now, or it's the way it's supposed to be, or it's a standard.
All right, so the answer is we do that too often, but the goal is to come back and clean it up when possible. All right.
Does it count when it's someone else's mess that you inherit?
Yeah, and then if you have to come in and clean it up, yeah, that counts. That happens.
Too often.
Yeah, that happens too often. Oh man, yeah. I used to do the consulting thing, and we would walk in. Who the hell set this up? And it's not just like, oh, this was a different method of attack than I would have taken. It's just like, oh no, this is a mess. This is network cabling, looping through things, or like, you know, the DNS server being all messed up. Yeah, there's a difference between like, all right, this works, but it's hacky, and like flat out wrong.
Or like DNS, what's that?
Yeah.
We just use IP addresses.
Anyway, questions last minute? I need help with blah, blah, blah. Go ahead. Go ahead. You got the people here.
I will have lots of questions next time.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll definitely be back. Like I said, I'm converting. I've done Mac support for a number of years now, coming into an environment where, and we have some guys who are already doing the Mac administration, but I want to complement their skills, of course. So between now and next month, I'm finishing some Cisco certification, and then I want to head headlong into just getting as deep as possible in the Mac. So I'm looking forward to it.
It sounds like you're headed in the right direction with getting some management agents on the machines. So, right on. All right, everyone. See you next month.